Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, August 20th, 2022, and today we are going to be taking a look at the state of Nevada, in which the Trafalgar Group released two new polls from the Senate race and the governor's race, showing the Republican Party ahead in both of these extremely important and very competitive races. In the Senate race, they show that the incumbent Catherine Cortez Masto is trailing the former Attorney General of the state, Adam Laxalt, by a margin of 3 points. Then in the governor's race, Steve Sisolak, the incumbent Democratic governor, is trailing the Republican nominee, Joe Lombardo, by a margin of 2 points across the state. Altogether, the Democrats and Republicans, neither of which hit 50%, meaning there's a significant portion of undecided voters, but ultimately the results here are Laxalt plus 3, the Republican, and Lombardo plus 2, also a Republican. And this is an important poll to look at because Trafalgar was off in past elections in some states, accurate in others, and in the state of Nevada, it was technically incorrect back in 2020, but only off by a margin of about 3 points. Now, it was actually within the margin of error in terms of the way that it was off. It showed that, or slightly there, Trafalgar showed that Trump was going to win by about 1 point, which is an overestimation for Republicans, and we should keep that in mind. The final results ended up being Biden plus 2.4. I think Nevada's a bit incorrect here on the margin. It is 2.4% statewide, as certified by the Secretary of State. But Trafalgar said that Donald Trump was going to win here by about 1 point. Now, a 1 point expectation for one side of the aisle, and that being incorrect, doesn't mean that this poll is inaccurate or something that we cannot trust. Trafalgar is a Republican pollster and typically does overestimate Republican support. However, they do provide some important data points and have been surprisingly more accurate than nonpartisan pollsters have been in the past. Now, specifically, they are more accurate in Trump election years. They're more simply able to gather in the Trump base, understand where people are, voting and how they're going to vote, what their intentions are. And it's been very helpful, I should say, for definitely the Trump campaign in both 2016 and 2020, especially with their numbers in some of the Rust Belt states that were just severely incorrect when it came down to 2020 polling and also 2016 polling. But for the state of Nevada, I am a bit apprehensive about some of these numbers showing the GOP ahead, at least by this narrow amount. I think it's a good result for the GOP. This is definitely, as good as what they could have asked for at this point right now. But what I will say is that in order for me to feel confident about a Nevada victory for the GOP, I would expect to see a margin larger than 3 and 2 points. And I'll briefly explain why as we look through the history. So in 2020, the polling was accurate in terms of the expectation and margin. It was actually right on the money. But in the 2016 presidential election, Hillary Clinton was expected to lose the state of Nevada by 1 point, and that's not what happened. Hillary Clinton won it by 2.4% statewide. Well, you fast forward to 2 years later in the upcoming midterm elections, Dean Heller and Jackie Rosen were expected to be in a tied race. Trafalgar expected Dean Heller to win by 3. He lost by 5. It was off by a margin of about 8 points. And then in the governor's race on the same election year, Adam Laxalt, yes, the same Adam Laxalt who was the Republican nominee for Senate this time around, again, the former Attorney General, he was expected to win by 1 point. Trafalgar had him up by 2, and he lost by 4. The reason why I'm telling you this, because polls in the state of Nevada almost always consistently underestimate the Democratic Party's support. If you want to expand further, we look at 2012, Mitt Romney, Barack Obama, that race, Obama was expected to win by 2.8. He won by 7. You take a look at the Senate race in 2012. Dean Heller was meant to win by 4. He won by 1. You take a look at the governor's race. Brian Sandoval was supposed to win by 17 points, won by 12. And then you take a look at the Senate race. Harry Reid was supposed to lose by 3 points. He won by 6. So when I see these numbers, when I see what was released and what was put out in the state of Nevada, I can't find really any exceptions to the standard understanding that Nevada polls always underestimate the Democratic Party. It is one of those very few states where you really start to see it become very consistent regardless of the election year, Trump or not, midterm or not. When Obama was there, when you had, Obama on the ballot, when you had Harry Reid on the ballot, when you had 2016, 2018, 2020, will it continue in 2022? Who knows? That's up in the air right now. But at the end of the day, what I will say is that it would be much worse for the GOP if these polls had consistently showed the Democrats ahead. The average here is that the Democrats are leading by about 1 point statewide. In any other state, that would be an indicator, probably, honestly speaking, that Democrats might lose that race rather than win it. But in the state of Nevada, this actually is surprisingly a different type of result that we can take from it. That it shows that Democrats are maintaining their lead and that there is an underestimation about their support. But 2022 could be entirely different. There is no, guarantee in one direction or the other. Looking at the state of Nevada right now, I would say that Democrats and Republicans are probably going to fight for this race more than maybe even Pennsylvania. Not necessarily in terms of resources or in terms of overall national importance in their eyes, but in terms of close and competitiveness, I absolutely expect Pennsylvania to vote to the left of Nevada in this upcoming election. It almost did back in 2020, off by 1.5 points. So to think that, to keep that in mind, it makes sense that Nevada is so competitive. But to see the Republicans ahead definitely isn't something that I would say definitively. This shows the GOP is on track for a solid victory in Nevada, just knowing the polling history in the state. But it does show good news at least, because at least it shows them ahead. And even if Democrats are, let's say, being underrepresented or expected by these polls by 3-4 points, yes, Democrats would win if these are the actual numbers on election day. But this means they're starting off at a good point. I've been talking about Adam Laxalt in the Senate race for quite some time in the state of Nevada, because as the former Attorney General, he knows how to win statewide. In addition to that, in 2018, he only lost by 4. 4 is not super impressive when 2018 was a Democrat plus 8 year. However, Nevada typically votes very narrowly in favor of the Democratic Party. 2016 and 2020 had identical margins, even in the Senate races. Very interesting. 2018, you saw a 4 and 5 point victory against a very unpopular Republican senator. You very rarely see landslides for any candidate. 2014 was one of the largest that we saw when Brian Sandoval won with 73% of the vote. But realistically speaking, Nevada never really hits an overwhelming margin in favor of either political party. So that might have been the case in 2018, but you can't deny that Adam Laxalt was able to lose a race by only 4 points in a year as beneficial for the Democratic Party. Adam Laxalt is again one of the stronger nominees, in fact, probably the strongest GOP recruitment for this election cycle. When you look at him compared to Dr. Oz, Blake Masters, and even to other candidates, not necessarily in Senate races, but also I would say Herschel Walker. But I would also, point out Carrie Lake in the state of Arizona, or Doug Mastriano in the state of Pennsylvania. I could imagine Adam Laxalt back to the governor's position, running for that as well, and being in just as good of a position to win that race. But you typically don't rerun. You typically don't put yourself back out for a race that you lost statewide 4 years later, but you could end up putting yourself out for a different race. And Adam Laxalt, honestly, has a very good shot at victory. Now, 43% isn't the favorite. I will say that if you take a look at the classic model, it goes up for the Democratic Party. 64, you take a look at the light model, though, it goes back down, probably because of the most recent poll. But the deluxe really shows a very competitive race. And it wasn't always this way. At different points, Adam Laxalt actually had the favorite and the expectation that he would beat Catherine Cortez Masto across the state at different points in time this past summer. But looking at the numbers now, Cortez Masto is ahead, but these polls definitely indicate potentially a narrowing. And I will say that this is very much a sleeper state as well. We rarely talk about the state of Nevada. We're always talking about Michigan. We're always talking about Pennsylvania. We're always talking about Ohio. We're talking about so many other states, Georgia, Arizona, but where is the focus on Nevada? And I will say that a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that we simply don't have enough data from the state. If you take a look at the polling across it, it has been pretty stagnant for quite some time. I mean, you're talking the same exact number of polls between April and May of 2022, then from May through June 2022, then through June, July, month after month after month, maybe 1 or 2 polls released. At some points, no polls released in an entire month span, and this is the first one released since, July 20th? We are nearing August 20th. In fact, today is, let's see here, let me make sure, it is August 20th. I said that earlier today. So literally a month in terms of the difference between the last time a poll was released across the state of Nevada, and that's how infrequently this race is being polled. But for another state, for example, such as Pennsylvania, just as important for Democrats, you can take a look at a lot of these polls have been released, a little bit less so now, but August 7th through 10th, July 29th through August 1st, July 22nd through 26th, 22nd to 24th, 19th through 21st. Nevada would be lucky to get a fraction of what we're seeing polled in this state. And it's even increasingly non-competitive races, such as the one in Ohio, July 1st through 3rd, 22nd through 24th, 21st through 28th, 1st through 3rd, 15th through 16th. These are polls that you're seeing in a state that is expected to be about 7 points to the right of the state of Nevada in this election cycle. So for there not to be much polling data means that a lot of this is going to be founded on the data that we receive from Trafalgar, from the infrequent pollsters that we have. Now, as of right now, I have the Nevada Senate race in favor of the Republican Party. That's something that I've been pretty consistent on, though I did have Democrats ahead at different points in time. It doesn't mean that Democrats can't win the state of Nevada by any means. I just think that there are warning signs here. But then again, polls do typically underestimate the Democratic Party, but I'm not entirely sold that they will this election cycle. It's always something that I have to wait and see for, and I can't expect, because as we saw, polls can be sometimes very accurate, forecasts can sometimes be very accurate, such as 2012, but they can also be very, very wrong, such as 2016, or in some cases, 2020. I mean, it is just really luck of the draw when it comes down to polling accuracy and consistency, especially when you're seeing conflicting data, such as Nevada, for instance, where you have polls from a month ago showing Democrats ahead, but today they're showing Republicans ahead. Maybe it's a change in trajectory, but that doesn't really match what we've seen on the national level, which is also what is leading this apprehension. Because when you take a look at the numbers from literally 1 month ago today, Republicans were up by 1.3% nationwide. Take a look at a month prior to that, June 20th, 2022, Republicans were up 2 points. Then, take a look at the numbers in May 20th, 2022, Republicans were up 2 points. Take a look at April, I mean, you're talking 2 points again. Very consistent lead. March 20th, also 2, right? Very, very consistent lead for the GOP on the national numbers. But in the past month alone, you've actually seen a reduction in support that has been very, very clearly displayed over the month. 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, Democrats reclaimed their advantage on the national generic ballot. And it's something that I wasn't really expecting to see a number out of Nevada that shows the Republicans ahead, which maybe may indicate that the state is having a rightward shift in favor of these candidates. Maybe it's the overwhelming Hispanic population that is shifting away from the Democratic Party. Only time will tell. But it's definitely something to consider, definitely something to think about, because it will be very important, and it could be a very big indicator of what might come in the state of Nevada as we continue forward. Again, it also does come a bit surprising to see that states such as Arizona are willing to vote to the left of Nevada when they didn't back in 2020. States such as Wisconsin are also considering it, in Michigan. I mean, these are states that all of which went to Trump in 2016, but Nevada remained for Hillary Clinton, which also means that I am a bit more inclined to believe that Democrats will win this race in the state of Nevada because Hillary Clinton was able to, because the Democrats were able to in 2016. Things like that don't happen unless there's a consistent and reliable Democratic base in the state of Nevada. I think maybe that's also something that the polls might be missing, that this is a state that typically has very close and competitive races, but in most cases, the Democrats win them. As much as it is a close and competitive state, it's similar to North Carolina in the aspect that one political party almost always, with very few exceptions, goes towards that party. That's the state of Nevada in a nutshell. But we have seen some alarming shifts among specific demographic groups that are extremely impactful in the state of Nevada for the Democratic Party. And it's definitely something to think about when you consider, what's going to be, who's going to be leading, what's going to be doing well for the Democratic Party, what's going to be, not working so much. Nevada could be quite interesting when it comes down to analyzing minority shifts, specifically Hispanic voters, once we actually see how they vote in 2022, because either A, it could raise some alarm bells for 2022, or it could show that maybe that Hispanic shift is only found in Texas and Florida, because you really didn't see much of it in other parts of the country, but Nevada exhibited a very narrow shift, but it was counteracted by more white suburbs that shifted in favor of the Democratic Party. So a counteraction on that front. What I think we should expect from the state of Nevada moving forward is that there will still be an expectation from the forecast that Democrats do win here. But I really think that, this is something that I just have a gut feeling about, that Republicans are going to do slightly better than expected within this state. That might be enough to win the Senate race. It might be enough to narrowly come close to winning the governorship, potentially winning it. I will say that I expect the Senate race to be voting to the right of the governorship. Both of them could go to Republicans. Both of them could also go to Democrats. No one entirely knows. But what I will say is that the expectation within these states definitely is changing as more data comes out. And as of right now, it isn't moving in favor of the Democratic Party. There's no way I look at these numbers from Trafalgar and say this is good for Democrats. What would be good for Democrats is if it was a 1-point lead, as it was in 2016 or as it was in 2018. But it isn't a 1-point lead. It's a 3- and 2-point lead. And at some point, it shows that it's outside the margin of error and that we should generally trust the data that we see. I think Democrats have a very good shot at victory here. So do Republicans. And that's the problem. That's why it's such a hard race to poll. But we deal with what the numbers that we have right now. And I will say that Republicans are probably very happy about these numbers. Not to a point where they think that it's assured and that they're absolutely going to win here, but it's definitely a silver lining amongst a number of recent numbers across many different states, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, that show the Republicans losing sometimes by epic proportions, or in the state of Nevada, a reliably Democratic state, they're sometimes pulling ahead or are very, very close to doing so. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.